Hello and welcome to the In Gaming podcast where I, Destino Will, along with my good friend and co-host Hardiman, talk all things video games. You can catch us at 7 p.m. GMT every Tuesday here on YouTube with a brand new episode. We love to hear from our listeners, so please give us a shout with any questions, feedback or suggestions, either in the comment section below or over on Twitter at In Gaming Podcast. If you enjoy today's show, please like, subscribe and share the podcast. And without further ado, let's take a look at what's been going on this week in gaming.
So this week I've been wrapping up a lot of the games that have been kind of in my backlog for some time now. As I'm looking going forward to maybe spending a bit more time in the MMO space, I'm looking to get back into Final Fantasy XIV. My task, as it were, if video games can ever be a task, is to get some of the games that have just been hanging around on my PS5 or on my PC for some time now, kind of get them played, get them finished, free up a bit of space on the computer for some of the other titles coming up over the next few weeks, few months, as there's quite a lot coming down the pipeline. So I wanted to just share a little bit of my thoughts. So I know it's been out for a year and a half, but this will spoil to an extent the story and some of the later parts of the Assassin's Creed Valhalla title. So if you are conscious of kind of finding out the story too early, this is the line you must not cross. So, going into kind of my overall thoughts, I have enjoyed it. I've enjoyed my time with the game. I think this was maybe one of the earlier podcasts that we did, kind of giving my thoughts. I enjoy, being British. There's obviously a lot of recognizable spots around the country. It's nice to kind of play an open world game set in the country that I've born and grown up in. And we've obviously had titles. We've had Assassin's Creed Syndicate in the past, which is set in London, but this obviously is a much wider scope and a long time in the past. So some 1100 years. So I've enjoyed the open world. It's felt decently big and not too cumbersome to get around. I have a feel, I think that when you eliminate, cars, quick vehicles, whatever it might be from an open world game, then it becomes a bit difficult to kind of understand what kind of scope you should have of the open world map, because you've got to contend with people walking or getting on a horse and riding. And The Witcher was always good at not making it too much of a trek if you needed to get somewhere. Elden Ring, which we're going to talk about in a bit, also does a very good job because of the numerous amounts of lost graces. So you can often always find yourself, at a fast travel spot that is close by to what you need. So I thought it did a relatively good job of that.
Sorry.
Go on. Yeah.
So with Valhalla, it was an absolute, because I played both versions, it was an absolute game changer going from PS4 to PS5, because the fast travel, even though it's necessary because of the size of the map, on PS4, it's anything but fast. The loading took so long, it was insane. And then
you might as well ride around.
The PS5 version is seconds, like it's almost instant. So that made a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing that I suppose I had from the start when playing it originally, because I played on PC, like with an fairly fast SSD. I had those kind of really quick loading screens when I first started playing Valhalla. But I then retired the PC version because I got it as part of Ubisoft Plus, and then went over to play it on PS5. So yeah, I think that would have been a major shock to the system if I'd been playing it on PC and then gone to PS4 and had to deal with the loading. So that kind of quick, snappy, fast travel was really beneficial. But I still felt like, from time to time, I enjoyed kind of just wandering around the world. There are various towns and cities in the game that you might otherwise not come by. You don't visit everywhere just by way of the main story quest. And obviously all of those have fairly recognizable names from places that I know in real life, so that's always kind of a boon to my relationship with the game. So I felt like the open world was good. I felt like the combat is particularly typical of kind of the past couple of Assassin's Creed titles, very much taking a lot of influence from The Witcher, that kind of lock-on combat and a lot of strafing around an enemy in order to kind of find weak spots, especially if they're shielded. So that was more kind of by the numbers, but I did enjoy some of the special moves. Although I did end up falling back on one specific special move, which was the one where you launch the axes at various different enemies. So I ended up just
first one you get, right?
Yeah, I ended up just using that, and the reason I use that is because it's really good for crowd control.
Yes.
But the only thing that bugged me about it was that it was very indiscriminate about which direction it threw axes. Mm-hmm. So in some occasions you could be fairly immediately next to three enemies, and you might throw axes at one, and then you throw axes at an enemy character that was maybe kind of 15 meters away, an enemy NPC, and then you kind of, I'm still being bad from either side. Yeah. So that was one thing that I, maybe wish that it was only within a certain range. It's nice to get those kind of long range kills, but when I used it, it was very much for crowd control. So it would have been better if they had to be within a certain range to take damage from it. Didn't use a lot of the arrow ones, but what I have to say is that while the skill trees seem to be, quite a fairly controversial topic when it comes to kind of modern open world RPGs. Sometimes they're too rudimentary, sometimes they're too complex. I felt that this was a fairly decent balance, in that while there was a vast array of kind of passive abilities, or some active abilities that you could get via the skill tree, a lot of the more frequent kind of core skills that you could upgrade, there weren't a lot of different types. It would be for a specific weapon, it would be your health or range damage, or heavy or light damage, and that made it quite easy, because as an RPG player, I always go straight for health. And I know some people do the opposite and they go straight for power, because they know that if they're more powerful, then they're not going to take as much damage because they'll be out of the fight quicker. Whereas I, as maybe a bit of a kind of a lazier gamer when it comes to studying attack patterns of enemies, having more health is better for me, because it just means that I can stay in the fight longer. So that was one path that I always went down, and made sure that I had kind of decent enough health. So I felt the skill tree was massive. There's still parts of the skill tree that are still clouded over, so it is huge. But I felt like those kind of core abilities that you were upgrading were simplistic enough so that it wasn't particularly overwhelming.
Yeah, I felt compelled to try and unlock the entire skill tree. So 2 out of the 3 sections, I've just got everything, regardless of whether I need it.
Yeah.
Like, builds be damned, I just wanted everything, which was totally unnecessary.
Yeah.
But it's nice to see it fill up. Well, I must say, I guess this is a good thing, because it means they're still supporting the game. But every single time I open it up, they appear to have patched in more things on the skill tree.
Yes.
More stuff will just pop up, and I'm like, oh, come on, guys, I've definitely built this bit.
There's definitely significantly more than I recall when I first played the game. They do just seem to be expanding it, and more kind of abilities as part of their kind of live service commitment to the title. And then as far as the adventure goes, and it's a symptom of I think just my playstyle when it comes to RPGs, is that I'm very stubborn about my kind of weaponry, and gear, in that I am not one for going in and trying loads of new things. You know, some people will have kind of hundreds of different, you know, builds, ideas. They've got equipment that they know that they like to combine to kind of gain some certain effect. Whereas I will often, maybe with weaponry less so than kind of armor, I will just throw on a weapon, you know, like a decent weapon that I get fairly early on, and just keep upgrading it as far as it'll let me, and then I'll stick to that. The only difference was the spear that you get kind of in the later game, the glowing spear.
Oh yeah.
You get in the later game. I started to use that a lot, you know, kind of in the later sections of the game. But aside from that, I stuck to pretty much the same shield and the same weapon throughout the entire 60-hour playthrough of the main story. So I'm sure there's a ton of gear. I'm sure there's so much stuff that I've not even, you know, begun to kind of discover and loot around various different raiding spots in the world, things like that.
That is something that I would give the game credit for, in that the way the gear upgrading works, you can essentially take the gear that you get through the first section, and you can take it through the entire game if you want.
Yeah, and definitely.
It's not going to punish you for choosing that. Like,
no, that's definitely, it's something that I find kind of really, you know, really plays into how I, you know, kind of come at RPGs. If I know I can get a set of gear, a set of weapons, set of armor that I like the look of, or I think is, you know, really good in terms of play style, being able to stick with that and not having my hand kind of forced when it comes to changing that weaponry or that armor, makes it feel like I'm making a conscious decision about what equipment I use, rather than the game making that decision for me, which I think I enjoy. So I'm sure there's plenty to discover that I've just not even begun to scratch the surface. There's obviously the 2 DLCs, the kind of smaller DLCs set in Ireland and France, and then there's the big Dawn of Ragnarok one, which I will get at some point and play. So I thought, so I think the open world's good, the combat's good, kind of skills and your gear that you can collect is good. I think one thing where it maybe fell a little shorter, and this is what I wanted to maybe talk about, you know, more in detail, is the length. So I got this game, I think, I'm pretty sure I got it on launch. I'm pretty sure I sat waiting for it to be unlocked on Ubisoft Plus, preloaded it and everything. So that was November 2020. It's taken me until now to play, to get through the main story quest, and that's not including all of the additional extras, and that's about 60 hours. Now, obviously, some people will be able to probably get through it quicker if they did less kind of, you know, walking around, less, you know, it ignored some of the side stuff, or if they just have a lot of free time on their hands and were able to, you know, spend 60 hours during the course of a few weeks to get it played. But I, as somebody with loads of other games on the go and loads of other commitments, it's taken me a year and a half to kind of get through it. And what that has meant is that and this is a kind of spoiler for the very end game, when you pacify England and you kind of complete all the arcs of the various different shires around and counties around England, all you get is a pop-up that says you have now pacified England. You can now do whatever you choose to do from this point onward, you know, whatever. And that was a bit of a letdown. And the reason I think it was a bit of a letdown was because I'd played some of the made it to Norway, done a lot of the Animus, outside the Animus stuff with Layla, and I'd gone to the cave in Norway and done that section as well, and it felt like it had fallen out of order from the way it had initially been intended. So essentially, what they've doing there is served the open world nature of the game over the narrative nature of the game. So they've decided to give more freedom to where you can go, as opposed to more tightly controlling how the story unfolds. So I did all of the going into the cave and seeing all of that, and then finish the kind of pacification of England, which I thought would end in a grand showdown with Alfred, and it didn't. Obviously, not canonically. I was going to say canonically, but this is real history. Obviously, there's no situation where Alfred died at the hands of Eivor, and I'm not too sure on the specific timing of it, but it didn't seem like Alfred was ill at this point, which obviously kind of died.
Wait. I think you may have also missed another part of this game.
I've been to the bit where I've done the Winchester arc, where I've met Alfred and killed some of the other some of the Order members.
Yeah.
But the last showdown was in that Chippenham bit where everything's on fire, and kind of Hunwald, Soma, and Hjor all die. I don't know whether that was based on what you picked in the game.
Be, yeah. Yes, because I think I had a different selection of people who survived or died. So
how very Mass Effect. And so I had those three die, and then there's the funeral, pyre and what have you, and then that seemed to be where it ended. There's no obvious direction for me to go, and I suppose if you're saying that maybe I missed another key part, that maybe proves kind of my point a bit about serving the open world over serving the kind of the order of the narrative.
Yeah. So the bit I'm referring to, and this is a huge spoiler, is after you've done the arc with him, it might be after you've done all of England, actually, you get another message from, what did he call himself? The Poor Soldier of Christ, was it?
Yes.
It was like the secret guy.
Yeah, that's what I've... Yes, yeah. So I haven't seen another... Do you mean following on kind of after the Alfred arc, where you go to Winchester?
Yeah, I think it becomes available. I think it's also, you have to do all of the Order, kill everyone.
Okay. Yeah, so
because
maybe that's...
It reveals... So are you going to play more?
Yes, yeah. I'm going to continue to play it, because there's the DLCs and what have you. And if you are now going to tell me that there's another bit of the kind of main story quest that I can go and do, then I'll go and do that. Yeah.
Okay, so I won't tell you what. But basically, finish the Order, and when you get to the end of that, that'll answer some of your questions.
Okay.
It'll open up a new bit as well.
Yeah.
But this just kind of proves what you're saying about how it's not particularly clear how you get to various quite important sections of the game.
Yes, yeah, I do think so. And that actually did, and spoilers, I guess, for Odyssey as well. That also reminded me of how I felt after finishing Odyssey, because I played it and I did the Atlantis bit before I killed all the Order members.
Yeah.
And then it felt as though maybe I should have done that in vice versa, and done it the other way round to get to kind of how they wanted the story to fall. So I guess, like I say, it kind of, that is maybe an issue I have with maybe some inconsistencies around how the story is told and where it tries to get you to go. They decided, I don't know, maybe in service of it being, a live game where you can kind of choose which direction you head and what you do, they've kind of left out some of those elements. So it felt like the story, and if the experience I get is one of kind of how is that what 60 hours has led me to, as opposed to somebody who might have killed all the Order and got to that point and then go, this is a really good ending to the story, then that is an issue around that kind of game design, and that people are getting an inconsistent experience across loads of different players.
The way it's designed is that there's a handful, maybe 4 sort of what it considers major arcs, and they all have their own bit of an ending. And so they all kind of, once you've seen them all, you have a sort of bigger picture of what's happened.
Yeah, because there's the prophecy ending, then there's the Alfred arc, then I think there's the Pacify England arc as well, and then whichever the other one is. And I've obviously just got to Vinland, so I need to do that.
Oh, you have gone.
That bit as well. Yeah, because that's the thing. I didn't know that I had to kill a very specific member of the Order to then find out that I had to go to Hytham and talk to him about another specific member of the Order, to then go to this entirely separate different place. That I feel like that is important enough for them to say, go and kill this person and then we'll tell you more. Not kill all the, I could have killed 99% of the other members of the Order before getting to these last 2, and wouldn't have known that the outcome of that was to go to another separate kind of, Newfoundland, which is what I think Vinland is meant to be. So it's a mixed bag, because I have really enjoyed it, and a lot of the story elements I actually have loved in terms of the main arc and kind of the involvement of Alfred and the kind of Fulke bit. I was getting quite riled up. I was like, come on, we need to go and get her. And then obviously the stuff with Sigurd and all of that. So there are loads of aspects to the story that I've really enjoyed, but I think due to the length of the amount of time that it takes to get to the point where everything is finished, that is what maybe leads to somebody going off in a different direction and it not all coming together as expected. Whereas, if you've obviously got a 25-hour, 30-hour game where the linear, where the narrative is more linear, but maybe within an open world, then it feels like you may be getting a more complete ending. But I mean, what do you think? Obviously, as we grow older, well, which sounds horrible to say, as we grow older, less and we don't have the free time that we maybe did when we were younger to play hundreds of hours of games, and for games to be long, but it didn't matter because we had all the time in the world to play them. As kind of commitments grow and other things kind of get in the way, the length of video games is becoming quite a topic that I'm I have mixed feelings on, compared to maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when I said, yeah, give me as much game as you possibly can.
Bigger is better. At one point, wasn't it? That was like if a game was only 20 hours or less, you'd be like, this isn't worth the money. It's got to be 100 hours for full price game. Well,
I remember specifically the Call of Duty 4 campaign. One of the criticisms of the Call of Duty 4 campaign was that it was only 6 hours long. But in hindsight, that was an action-packed 6 hours that I think was a really tight package, instead of kind of these longer form campaigns. But yeah, how's it kind of affected how you look at games?
So I started it around the same time as you, also at launch, so some time ago. And the difference with my experience has been that when I got it at first, it was a time when I was out of work, so I did have all that free time. I still haven't I've completed the main story, but I haven't actually finished all the expansions. Originally, because I had the time, I was taking the completionist approach. I was going to do, every little thing in every area. And I think that in turn actually made me take longer to finish the story, because I'd get such fatigue from trying to do all that stuff, and it wasn't that interesting going around finding things.
Yeah.
So there's far too much side stuff to do. If they'd sort of made the central narrative a bit more streamlined. I know open world is kind of their thing, but I would have liked that. And if they'd kind of made it clear in the quest log, perhaps, which things are the things that lead to various parts of the ending. So it would be easier to say, like, right, I've got to do this one because this lead, well, it's telling me that this one's more important than the rest.
Yeah.
Whereas it wasn't particularly clear if something was a side quest or if something was, just something was something that had been patched in. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's too long, though. That's what short thing is. I'm going to say it's too long.
Yes, yeah, I completely agree. And I think that, I think it's just the way that Assassin's Creed games have been going. And it's weird because I really enjoyed kind of most of my time with Odyssey. Like I actually felt like I had a good time, even though that was a long game as well. At this time round, it's felt more fatigued, and I think that's maybe just as a symptom of kind of overall thoughts on these really long games these days, and to an extent, it could have been, that there were various aspects of kind of, leveled areas in Odyssey, which are a little different. So it always felt like it was an achievement, kind of getting to go to a place. Where it's worth saying that I can't remember what the recommended power level for the last arc is. I think it was maybe 380. Something like that. I was 227 and I finished it.
Oh, really?
So I was severely underleveled.
I was the opposite because I'd spent so much time doing extra stuff, and you basically get a point for literally everything. So I was probably about 80 over the recommended level last time I got around to doing it.
Yeah, and it didn't feel... I didn't die during the Goodwin boss. I didn't die during the kind of one of the big... the big battle towards the end. So it did feel to a certain extent like the level was fairly arbitrary when it comes to kind of actually being able to complete off any of these elements.
I think maybe early on when before you put, you got your stats up, it might have made, if you'd gone into like right at the beginning, if you'd gone to the wrong place, you probably get chopped down fairly easily.
But it got to a point where if I had that big spear, it would just absolutely just wreck everybody. So maybe it's not an issue completely with kind of the lengths of games, but it's more about how you led through those hours. And if it feels like a reward getting to each next section, then it's maybe less so of an issue. Whereas it did feel like I was, maybe 80 levels underneath what I needed to be in order to go to York, for instance. So instead, for a bit, I was just like, right, well, I'm just gonna go and have to find some side stuff to do. But for a fairly decent chunk of time, I know you get kind of points for maybe quite a lot of stuff, but in order to rack up another 80 points, it's still kind of quite a big chunk of time doing side stuff. And it just wasn't particularly...
Roughly 40 activities.
Yeah, I just wasn't particularly interested in doing that, so I just bit the bullet and just decided to go, despite being underleveled, just to kind of get it out of the way. And that is kind of the phrase that maybe I'll would come back to, is getting it out of the way. Like there comes a time in some of these long games where my initial excitement, the hype of getting through the game, has kind of faded away a bit, and now it feels more like I'm just kind of chugging through or like wading through this the kind of mud to get through to some sort of end. I'm a bit like, oh well, I don't want to finish it because I want to find out what happens. I want to finish it because it's just taken me so long, and I've got other things that I want to play, and storage is finite on, games are so big these days that
especially this one.
Exactly. Every game's 60, 70 gigabytes at least, and so I need the room, and so I just need to get it out of the way. And I think that maybe has hampered the experience somewhat. I have still really enjoyed it. That has to be said, but I do hope they take more of a focused approach next time, because I think it needs it after 3 massive country spanning, Egypt, Greece, and now Britain. I do think they need to maybe rein it in a little, because I think people's time in general, maybe the median age of gamers, I don't know what the median age. The average age of a US gamer is 35.
Well, I'm 34, so
yeah.
That's nice.
So what it shows is that median age is kind of in the mid-30s, and is perhaps a situation where people have commitments outside of video games, have more of a limited time to play them as they might want, and more needs to be done to kind of service the people who pay, put the money into video games. They buy the consoles off their own back, buy the video games off their own back, and maybe less of a focus on the kind of endless time that young people have, to play Fortnite or whatever the new hotness is, Roblox or what have you. We the people who essentially are the kind of the finance behind the video game industry, kind of disposable income of kind of young adult earners. More needs to be done to make sure that these games aren't so ridiculously long that we just don't have time to play them. And one thing before if you want to share any more on kind of your thoughts on the length of games, the Dying Light tweet was almost iconic now because of this very reason. Hearing from SkillUp, a YouTuber who's in his mid-30s, saying, look, we don't have 500 hours, and they're going, oh well, the main story quest you could probably get done in 100 hours. I don't have 100 hours. I don't have 100 hours, and I want a game to be wrapped up. I don't want to be slogging through a game over the course of a year. There are so many titles releasing one after the other, and MMOs take that kind of space of the long form game. But with everything becoming a live service, it's like, no, we need to keep you engaged long term. Like, why can't games keep me engaged in the short term, be a real honest, focused, enjoyable experience where no time feels wasted, and then let me go and play something else? But I don't know what, what do you think? Do you find time, on an average week, how many different games do you think you are able to kind of play or get through? Is it a case of working through a backlog you have, or specifically focusing like in your case on kind of Destiny as your weekly game of choice?
So the thing is, for me, I have this Destiny, which I probably play a bit of most days, and then I've one night a week where a bunch of friends play Final Fantasy 14, and so they take up a lot of time. And if I cut Destiny out, I would have a lot of time to catch up with other stuff, but don't want to because it's probably my favorite game at the moment.
Yeah,
and it's always. You always get downtime with the Destiny season, so I guess that's when the first month usually has a lot going on, and then they kind of calm down. So that's probably the time where I'll be able to catch up with some other games. I've actually made a backlog list, and it's disgustingly big.
Oh, I don't even want to think about how
But,
it was. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just kind of like, but then I want to finish games. But then when I'm supposed to do other stuff like a bunch of TV shows I want to see, things like that, like, got a pile of books I want to read.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I honestly think we're just hitting a limit of how much content we can consume. We live in the age of constant content. Every day, billions of hours of content is uploaded around the world, whether it's TV shows, YouTube series, or or it's written books, or it's video games. And sometimes it's really hard to kind of dispel the just cloud of new content and be able to focus on something without having to move on to the next thing.
Picking one thing and going, this is what I'm doing till I finished it, is quite a difficult.
Yeah.
It's quite difficult to focus with the amount. Like I said, there's a lot of stuff always all around.
And I think,
obviously specific with games. So you did just what you actually asked me about the length is that I'm happy to take a big an open world game and then say, right, I'm just going to only do the main central story, get that good narrative experience, and see it through. And I can do that, but it's often out of necessity because time.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to end up feeling kind of like, well, there was this whole world that I could have spent many hours exploring, finding secrets, and I'm just going to miss that, which that could be some of the best stuff in the game for all I know.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like,
do you live in blissful ignorance of the stuff that you've missed and just move on, or do you kind of sit and regret? And I guess that's to an extent Destiny. We played a bit of the Disciple raid, and then I've done the Leviathan one, and then I think Vault of Glass a long time ago when Destiny 1 first came out. That is it. And there've been The Last Wish, Garden of Thorns, Scourge of the Past. There've been loads of other raids, Crota's End, King's Fall, take your pick. There've been a lot of other raids as well. And I sometimes sit and I think, how much content have I missed out on? How many raid specific guns, raid specific armor or mods or whatever it might be that I've not got because I've not played the raids. And I kind of go back and forth between telling myself I'll make a conscious attempt to do them at some point, and then going, I don't have the I don't have the time, because when you add in the fact that now that the raids are all out, you can go and watch guides, for as long as you want, but they don't immediately translate into actual kind of skill or knowledge of the game in the moment. So you can go and watch a guide, but that doesn't mean that you're going to get straight through an encounter in a raid. So there's still an element of skill and what have you, and having the right loadout, and that takes time as well. And it's I think maybe there's a big discussion to be had over how large the AAA space has got in terms of kind of game length. And one thing that I was just going to bring up before is that while we may have kind of this onslaught of content to consume, there are occasional kind of diamonds in the rough that I am so drawn to immediately that I will just play or watch or read or what have you in one go. I watched the whole of Peacemaker in 2 days. So that's eight episodes, about maybe 45-50 minutes an episode. That show was so good, so funny, so almost unique in its comedy and its mix of comedy and violence and its character development, that binged it in the space of a couple of days after watching the Suicide Squad. So that is a TV show that took me so by surprise at just how good it was that I couldn't leave it there like I have done with other shows. I couldn't just kind of ignore it for a bit and go, but I'll watch it later. No, I have to watch the whole thing now because it's that good. And there are some like that, but I think we maybe live in a world of a lot of content, but a lot of middling content. How much time do I have to spend on a show that is just all right? I need, it's becoming more and more valuable, those really, really standout shows or standout games, because we need more of those in amongst a lot of half-assed, phoned-in stuff. So, that I think it comes into gaming as well.
I think it's probably a fair thing to say that regardless of whatever praise we might have had for Valhalla, as an example, the fact that it's taken us both so long to get to where we are means that it's simply not engaging enough.
No.
Because there are other games of a similar size where we probably have just smashed. For example, Red Dead Redemption 2. Maybe I think we both basically smashed it out over the course of a few weeks, a month of it being released.
Yeah,
and that was huge, obviously. And the narrative and the story, it hooked you so much that we just kept going,
kept driving you forward. And even as a big game in terms of its open world, that's obviously a discussion we can have kind of another time in terms of whether the Rockstar gameplay design is a little bit outdated in the modern world, because it kind of forces you into these linear sections, and kind of the open world is very much transitory. It's about getting from kind of A to B. But one thing that does lead to is a driven story that you keep following and you know where to go to keep it going. And then it comes to an end. At a point, it comes to an end, and you've obviously got the prologue when it comes to Red Dead Redemption 2, which is, I thought was really good, that kind of additional prologue. But that is a situation where, despite the gameplay or the kind of the way that Rockstar styles their games might have been outdated, it can't be said that you didn't feel like you were driving along that story at every moment. Whereas I felt like at any given time, the story in Valhalla could have gone any different direction. I didn't really understand, what path am I along at the moment, because they'd had those separate arcs. And I think maybe that comes into it, is that they've got those separate kind of mini story arcs that are set around the counties, in England, and they very much have a beginning and an end. And they seem to get shorter towards the end of the game. I don't know whether it's just me, but I did feel like some of the later arcs that are more higher leveled, I got through maybe in an hour, as opposed to some of the early ones, which felt really, like the London one or whatever, felt, kind of chunky when it comes to how much content they had. But that meant that everything felt kind of self-contained, and I didn't particularly understand, beyond pledging to fight Alfred, what the wider, kind of implications of those different story arcs were. You obviously get a bit of the Order of the Ancients, and eventually you go and find Sigurd as part of that. So they kind of do drip feed you some of that main story arc, but it still felt a bit erratic and disconnected at times, for me anyway.
The problem, I think the problem with that is that the pacifying England part of all the individual arcs for the areas, that was basically the core of the main game, because that's the big chunk of the content. But those bits until you get to the end and like you all come together, it's just it almost seems like each one's a side quest with a vague promise of a future ally. Just kind of like you don't really know why you're getting all these allies.
Yeah.
It's not like if you knew from the beginning that who you were going to fight and what you're going to do. If you don't, and then it's like, right, we need to get people on our side. That'd probably make me be more driven and focused rather than just, oh, we want to make friends because we're in a new place.
Yeah. And I mean, so I suppose kind of just in terms of historical fact and fiction, it very much felt like you were a kind of minor agent in a lot of these stories, but they pledged their entire kind of fighting force to you, and then eventually you go. But obviously, in terms of kind of serving elements of historical, kind of being genuine to the history, you couldn't just go and take over and occupy, like in the past we maybe have occupy loads of different areas of England, because that's just not how the history went. So maybe they were a bit kind of constrained by that. But yeah, I certainly think as we go forward, I'd like to see more focus games, which, funnily enough, unless you've got anything to share, will be the next thing we talk about, which is Elden Ring, which is a massive game. It has to be said, and you can spend hundreds of hours in that game, but it very much feels like the amount of time you spend is yours to do with what you will. And you could easily just as much spend little time if, for instance, you were excellent at killing bosses, even at a low level. You could scrap through that game really quickly, or you can go and explore everything if you want. But I know that you'd mentioned that some people on Twitter had been asking kind of our thoughts. Now we're a few weeks into its launch, so why don't you share with us what you think?
Follow on Twitter, Lima app just asked us what our thoughts were. Basically, obviously, we had our first impressions a few weeks back. So, having sunk several hours into it, I know you've put a lot more time in it than I have so far. Still, if we could just, what are your thoughts after putting significant amount of time into it compared to that initial impact?
Well, I mean, if you want me to go on first, then I'm still really enjoying it. It's one of those games where almost to a kind of maybe very low level kind of addictive nature, and not it necessarily by way of the mechanics of the games. It's not like gambling or kind of gacha games or anything like that. But I'm so drawn to that world that any time I'm out of it, I think, damn, I just want to load up Elden Ring and get going. Get playing in it again. Go around. Kind of kill some ads, get some runes, level up. What have you. I'm kind of being constantly drawn back into discovering more, going in and finding out more. And what I think is really nice is that I've put maybe 40 odd hours into it, but I'm actually only level 46, which is a lot less than kind of maybe other kind of equivalent that I've seen on the internet players of kind of that amount of time that they've put into it, because I'm not following it linearly. I've been discovering all of the different areas that you don't get to until kind of late game, just because of the kind of joy of the exploration, seeing what different kind of horrible twisted enemies there are in various different areas in the game, looking visual perspective, what all these different areas look like and how they differ from one another. And it's meant that every time I jump in, it's not to go and fight a boss. I've only actually killed two of the main story bosses that you need to kill in order to progress. I've killed quite a number of side bosses, but I'm just going in just to find somewhere on the map, go and find out what massive, kind of what surprisingly huge area there is to explore that seems to be just off in some, kind of nondescript area of the map. I'm absolutely loving how much dedication has gone into making each part of the map feel like you want to go and find out what that ruin, that you've seen on the map looks like, actually is when you get there. There's one bit where, and I won't spoil it, but I've been kind of circling around this same area for quite a long time, and then I found out that it was a valley that I could get down to, run up go up this specific valley and find an entirely different area with its own boss, its own enemies, its own kind of little little town or what have you. A place that I had no idea existed until about 35 hours into the game, despite having been around that area quite a lot previously. I found another 4 or 5 lost graces to kind of fast travel to, and I was like, I got there and I thought, my God, because every single aspect, it's a video game. Somebody has to design these elements of this game, and I'm sat there thinking, I can't believe that in this random area of the world, somebody has been tasked with, or somebody has decided to build out this whole area to have you explore, and it's totally irrelevant to the main story. It doesn't need to be there, but I feels like there's a purpose to me being there. I guess unlike maybe Valhalla, where it feels more aimless.
So you bring it back to Valhalla, which is good, because I was about to come back to that as well.
Yeah.
So what you've described over talking about 2 different games, which are both open world, is the complete opposite approaches in each one. Yeah. And I've done the same. And I think for me personally, the sort of kind of 2 core reasons why I'm happy to spend time exploring in Elden Ring, but it feels pointless and endless in Valhalla is, one, you kind of touched on it with the whole world building. It just feels, I don't know, it just feels a lot more alive. Valhalla kind of feels sterile at times, I guess. And again, maybe that's partly because of the constricts of trying to be historically accurate. There's only so much you can do. And the other thing is, I think it's the fact that you have a lot more agency in Elden Ring. It's not a checklist exercise to do all the extra stuff. Like, you don't know it's there until you find it. So it's not like, all right, this area's got 10 treasures, got to go and find them all. It's, as you say, what's that over there? Is that a thing? So you just go towards it, and it might be something, it might not be. And having the freedom to explore. So the thing in Elden Ring is, if you don't find something, you won't know you've missed it. So there's no fear of, like, kind of FOMO kind of thing there, because you find what you find, and that's your experience.
Yeah.
Valhalla, there's 40 collectibles in London, but you're not willing to spend an additional 10 hours on your save just to collect them. Yeah. And a bunch of gear that you won't even use.
Because you get there and they've got the pop-ups that'll tell you how many chests needed looting or what have you. And I've seen a weird, and it infuriates me to an extent. I've seen a weird, like, criticism of the fact that the quest, that the kind of, these small quests within Elden Ring with NPCs don't give you kind of checklist or really kind of any specific instructions on how to get to the next step. They give you kind of more of a vague overview. I need this doing or whatever, and then go back and find them and kind of complete that next storyline. And I've seen criticism of that going, oh well, how are people meant to know where they are? And I'm just thinking, how have we got to the point of such instant gratification of completing an objective, going through and finding a loot chest and ticking, seeing the number tick up and the number tick up until it's completed. And I absolutely love the free flowing, kind of nature of the Elden Ring quests and the Elden Ring world that isn't bound by steps already predefined by somebody who's decided what, that they want you to go and take this off the next list and the next list, and they keep coming, list after list after list, going after it to in order to get achievements or what have you. This is a game that is as big or as small as you want it to be. You don't need to. It can be massive. There's so much content. It's unbelievable. There's so many areas of this world, an entire underground, overground, loads of different ruins and forts and all this jazz that you don't need to touch in order to progress through the main story. But if that's the experience you want, you got it. If you want to go online and search how to complete Elden Ring, they will list you all the bosses in order that you've got to get through and make it work. If you're good at boss killing, then you can probably do it, without having to completely over level like somebody like me. Whereas I, for instance, have chosen to explore the world more because I want to over level myself because I'm a bit weaker in the kind of boss fighting elements. So they've given me the option to do that. That's the accessibility that we're talking about. And we're seeing accessibility by way of gameplay instead of options. And I think that's so clever that they've been able to build that into how you play the game rather than the options you're given to go easy, medium, or hard. The bosses will be as easy or as hard as you're willing to spend the time to get yourself prepared for them. And that doesn't erase the challenge of, you've got to find, see if the boss's moves are well telegraphed. You've got to find out their attack patterns. Yeah, there's no getting around that. That is what these games are. That's what Soulsborne games are. But never before have you been given such freedom to make sure that you're in the best position you can be to go and fight that fight. And I just think it's phenomenal. Absolutely. And I know I've barely even scratched the surface of all the other wacky areas in the game that there are. And I think that's just absolutely beautiful because we hear in so many games, I'm sure when Ghost Recon Wildlands came out with its massive world, they go, see a mountain, you can climb it. But what's the point? See a mountain, you can climb it. What's up the mountain? What reason have I got to be over there? I know for certain if I put a marker down at something that interests me, that it's very likely that when I get to that place, there will be some reason for me to be there. If it's a new sword, new armor, if it's an NPC, whatever it might be, there's so much kind of creativity and love and passion poured into every aspect of this game. There's no filler. And that I think is just absolutely phenomenal for me, even as somebody who's played all the Soulsborne games but isn't particularly good at them. So that's how I'd kind of sum it up. I'm really, I know I've got hundreds of hours left to go and on all the different builds. I'm feeling like a different. And one thing before I want to find out what your thoughts are. Somebody who's played it maybe a little bit less. Builds feel, I feel like in maybe Assassin's Creed Valhalla or some other similar open worlds, it's a case of putting on a few different weapons or choosing a few different skill sets, and then you've inherited this new build. Whereas it feels like every single type of player is catered for with Elden Ring, in terms of magic, in terms of kind of faith and sorcery, and dex builds or strength builds, the katanas, the samurai. Every single build has had care and attention poured in to make sure that you can take that build as far as you want, and you're not bound by a few kind of hard coded skills that define what your build is. You define your build and how you play that game. And every time you start a new game with that new build, you feel like you're playing the game entirely differently. So anyway, that on, I want to hear what you think.
Yeah, on the note of builds, so Assassin's Creed Valhalla has like a crazy amount of scope in terms of what you can do with it. But my problem with it is it just doesn't matter. You can make a super specialized build and it's barely going to change your experience, I don't think. Whereas, as you say, with Elden Ring, it's a lot more. It's, I don't know, it's just like you need to spec your character to your style, because there's a lot of ways you can kill a boss or general enemies, but there's only going to be one or two ways that you'll be good at doing it, and then you've got to tailor your equipment and your stats to that. So yeah, I've played less time than you. On my sort of main save, I think I've played maybe about 12 hours. And I think I'm quite close to the second story boss, but I have been doing a lot of side quests up and down the map, trying to just get more of the map revealed and things like that as well. I would be further along, but I have actually also spent some time just creating more characters and just trying out the different classes to see what they're like. Because previously in these kind of games, I've only ever just played the standard sword and shield kind of guy. But because there's more freedom to this and there's more things to go and do, I feel like it's worthwhile experimenting before I get too far in case there's something else I want to give a try. It's nice you find different weapons. I've not found loads, but when you find different weapons, it is like a completely different kind of combat. The special abilities you can get access to change depending on what weapons you've got as well. So that's kind of like just have to kind of like relearn everything if you want to change up your gear. But it's a good thing. It is a good thing because the differences are significant enough. It feels like. Yeah, I like just being able to wander around, spot things in the distance, such as a giant crab, which I thought was a small crab until I got up close to it. Just random stuff like, and you just go. Well, then there's little bits of lore and stories you can see going on. Like there's the giants you see which have been enslaved and they're pulling around like carts. Yeah. Right. Okay. So they're monsters, but they've been enslaved by the soldiers that are with them. What's going on here? And it's not really like, it's not in your face. It's a story and it tells you exactly what's happened. You can kind of draw your own conclusions based on where you see them, the area, what's going on.
Yeah.
But it just feels very natural to come across things.
Yeah, the open world does feel, like there's those things where the game is not going to explicitly explain to you what's going on. You need to kind of make your own mind up and kind of infer based on what you can see.
Yeah.
Whereas it felt like maybe, coming back to Valhalla, moving between point A and point B, I didn't see anything on the way aside from maybe a town that I recognize the name of, that, this town was full of the same NPC models kind of Anglo-Saxons or Danes that any other given town look like, and they all had the same buildings, and they all, I didn't get into any of those towns and find out a whole backstory, history of how that town came to be, or what's going on between the kind of people in that town. It just felt really, really empty. There was nothing that you could even kind of make your own mind up about. It just didn't feel, it felt particularly kind of hollow and, like you said, sterile. Whereas this game, despite also being a game on horseback and with medieval buildings and ruins and what have you, didn't feel empty or, kind of not alive. There's loads of different bits that got to, and I was like, I can't believe this is here. Going into, obviously you're kind of early on, but going into some places that just absolutely blow your mind of how, kind of how on earth any of that came to be, and learning that through seeing stuff, through hearing things from kind of NPC characters. I think it's just phenomenal. It's so good. I don't know how. It's obviously only been 3 years since Sekiro came out. I think that came out in March 2019. I don't know how they must have been working on this for much longer, or they're really, really good at pulling a game together this massive, this so filled with stuff in the space of 3 years, which I can't quite believe, because there's just so much to it. It's just, like I say, it's that world that every time I'm not playing it, or I'm watching somebody play it, I'm going, I'm just going to jump back on. I have to jump back on. And I could spend a couple of hours not actually doing anything except wandering around, finding another new place to go and see. And I think that's what makes it kind of stand out amongst other open world games. Definitely. Now I just want a board game version, because we've got the Dark Souls board game. So
yeah, that's good.
I would like I think that'd be pretty good. And then you could have Limgrave as kind of the main area, and then a couple of the main bosses, and then you could get like expansions for all of the different other areas, and suddenly you've got a kind of big map of Elden Ring to go board gaming on. So I think that'd be very good to see. I've loved it. I think it deserves, aside from maybe some performance issues, which have always been a problem, I would, I'd say that it deserves the praise it's got, certainly. And it sold 12 million copies, so it's clearly no slouch on the mainstream market either.
Yeah, it's done very well, considering if you prior to release, you'd look online and see this game, it's just another game that's too hard for normal people, whatever.
Yeah,
but the sales speak for themselves, don't they?
They really do. Yeah. Anything else you want to share? Anything else that stood out kind of in the 12 hours you've played? Don't say no. We've just spent half an hour praising it. And you say nothing. It's just nothing stood out.
I think at this point it's just really enjoyable. But I will say I didn't play it for a week. Then I logged in and I'd completely forgotten how to do the fight combat. I think that says more about me than the game.
Yeah, or the amount of games that we can play these days that all have different control sets, and so I'd be hitting circle to roll or square to sprint, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, so that's kind of annoying. But now I'm probably going to be playing more today, and hopefully talk with you some more about it in the future. Yeah,
absolutely. I think as we move towards the end game, I think that'd be a good if I can get there. Good point to kind of talk about it when maybe we've had a fair shot at getting quite far into it, although that will be challenging, quite difficult. But there's still lots to do. Right. Well, to wrap this episode up, I just wanted to provide a small update on the Gran Turismo 7 controversy, which seems to have completely blown up, and now everybody's talking about it. It'd gone from people complaining on the Gran Turismo Reddit that only IGN had picked up that they'd had downtime, but as soon as the economy was nerfed, that's when when everybody started to pick up on it and maybe talk about it a bit more, which has definitely influenced maybe the speed with which the statement that they put out a couple of days ago. So this is a statement from Kaz. So what I'll do is I'll just I'll read the first paragraph, and then I'll just talk a bit about the changes being made. So this is from Kazunori Yamauchi, so president of Polyphony Digital, creator of Gran Turismo. So he says, quote, "Thank you for your continued support and feedback on Gran Turismo 7. Your voices have not gone unheard. I would like to apologise for the frustration and confusion caused last week with our patch updates, which resulted in not only a server outage, but also adjustments to the in-game economy, which were made without a clear explanation to our community." So this is referring to this statement is referring to the economy as opposed to the patch, because the patch was an issue with people being able to play, so they had to hold off and put out another kind of emergency patch in 1.08, which got the game back online. But this says the updates, which will come into effect at the beginning of April, will be to increase rewards in the events in the latter half of the world circuits by approximately 100% on average. So that, I believe he's referring to, is the latter half of which you unlock them through the cafe system, because you don't unlock any of the world circuits without doing the cafe, the kind of cafe single player menu system. And once you've gone through that, you unlock, I think, 35 tracks. So I think the latter parts, these tracks are meant to be maybe more complex or more difficult. So they're planning on upping the rewards that you get from those by, like I said, approximately 100% on average. Addition of high rewards for clearing the circuit experience in gold or bronze results. So I think currently, I don't know whether there are any at all. I think you just get credits for. I've completed some of the circuit experiences, but not all the way through. So I think at the moment you just get a single credit payout for each one. And there's not kind of a grand reward at the end for finishing them all, like you might expect with the car in the missions or the license tests section. So increase of rewards in online races, which are at the moment deemed to be pretty awful. A YouTuber, Gran Turismo YouTuber called Tijni, he said he did a 12-hour stream in which he played maybe the Group 3 multiplayer daily race on sport mode, and he got out of that, I think, maybe 500,000 credits. That's from 12 hours of online play, which obviously deemed to be more difficult because he's already in top split because he's a really good Gran Turismo player. But obviously sport's more difficult because you're not racing against, kind of brainless AI that kind of, stick to a specific driving line. So increase the rewards on that front. And include a total of 8 new 1-hour endurance race events to missions, which have been notably missing. Endurance races have been notably missing. They were a big part of the earlier Gran Turismo games. These will also have higher reward settings. So I'm hoping to see a big payout on those endurance races. Increase the upper limit of non-paid credits in player wallets from 20 million credits to 100 million credits. So that means that you can earn up to 100 million of non-paid credits, because I believe previously, obviously, if you pay for credits, that bank can be as big or as small as you're willing to pay for credits. And increase the quantity of used and legend cards on offer at any given time. So that is a bigger used garage and more legend cards instead of just the 5 that are on rotation at the moment. So those all look relatively good for the time being. They look like they may be balancing out some of the later game circuits to make these more rewarding, considering they're more difficult. But they also go on to say that there are some additional elements that are coming between now and the end of April, that will add new cars and course layouts and then make some other fixes as well. So we've got new DLC on that front. And then they finally say we want an opportunity to lay out some of the near-term updates we are working on. We can't confirm an exact date or specifics yet, but we'll give advance notice. So this increases the payout of limited time rewards as we develop as a live service. So those are limited time events that weren't in the game and have been in previous games. Further World Circuit event additions. So, like I mentioned maybe last week, there's a number of World Circuits that maybe only have one race on them. And aside from that, you just do the time trial or make your own custom race, which obviously doesn't give a good credit payout. Addition of endurance races to missions, including 24-hour races, which I know that some people will be happy about because they are committed to sitting in a racing seat or on their sofa with a gamepad for 24 hours straight, which I don't think I'd be doing anytime soon. Addition of online time trials and awarding of rewards according to the player's difference with the top ranked time. So they are online leaderboards for time trials. And finally, make it so cars can be sold, which was an aspect to the game that they had said would be part of it before release and wasn't. So those changes look set to hopefully balance some things out, to increase the rewards in the in-game economy, to make some of the more challenging aspects more rewarding, which they aren't at the moment. The only thing that I am disappointed to see disappointed to not see on there was I would prefer them raising the bottom level reward that you can get by the roulette tickets. I think 2,000 credits, when it always seems to obviously be weighted towards a lesser reward, is not acceptable. They need to make they either need to up that to 10,000 credits, or they need to weight it so that you've got more, you've got a bigger chance of getting the higher rewards.
Every single roulette ticket I've had the worst reward every single time. I'll fail.
Yeah.
I don't know because there's different star levels of roulette tickets, and I don't know if the higher one, but you get more chance for the better prizes, or
I think there's from 1 to 6.
Oh, right, okay.
So you can, but the fact that some of them are invitations to buy cars, some of them are parts for cars that you don't own or don't really care to have a component for, or
I've only had credits every time, but always the smallest pile of them.
Yeah, so that needs to change. You need to be more likely to get the higher ones, because in GT Sport you used to just get a car every time you did a daily workout. You get a car, so that needs to change. Sometimes you get a replica car and you get the credits instead, right? So not a replica car, another one, a duplicate. I said replica.
We can do words.
I mean, they are replicas of real cars, so
yeah,
I'll hold myself to that. So there are still some things they can do to make this work, but it's good to see that there are some good steps in the right direction. So hopefully we have to see where the game goes from now. I will probably get into the online, like I said, when when we've moved house and I'm able to get more of a permanent kind of wheel setup going, especially with a PS5 wheel, which I'd have to buy separately. And at that point, I'll probably play a lot more online. But that is the update. Heading in the right direction. Could be moving a bit quicker. Some of these should have been sorted out before the game was even released, but the world of video games at the moment,
that's how it is.
That's how it is. So I think that's everything from me. I've not got any other updates coming up. In terms of game releases, there is Lego Star Wars, I believe, on the 4th. Tiny Tina's Wonderlands just came out, so those are two that I've got my eye on. Ghostwire Tokyo came out as well. Probably wait for that to drop. I'm still eventually going to get Dying Light 2. So there's some stuff, new releases on the horizon that look pretty good. So hopefully they turn out to be decent games. So if I get my hands on those, I'll obviously, we can have a chat about that going forward.
I'd like to just quickly talk about games that we might buy.
Oh,
the
yeah.
game which I was going to buy, which I'm now probably going to wait till it's on sale, is Final Fantasy Origin Stranger of Paradise.
Oh, yes.
Which has had somewhat of a rocky start.
Aye.
It seems to be very all over the place. Sometimes it'll look incredible, other times it'll look like it's on a PS2. When it runs smooth, it looks nice, but as soon as anything happens, the frames drop. The biggest issue apparently is every time there's a nice hair or fur texture on screen, the frames drop to about 8 FPS. PC players have actually modded the game to make all the characters bald in order to have a consistent frame rate.
That's amazing.
Which is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard, but I thought it's funny enough it's worth sharing.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I've been staying away from that game just because I thought I'll let it release and see what happens. But yeah, keep an eye on that. And then one other thing that I'll just drop in. Yesterday, I saw the Batman. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is.
Will says it's amazing. If you've not seen it, go and see it. This is not sponsored by Warner Brothers. We are the last people they would probably sponsor. So I'm being honest when I say that it's incredible. Go and watch it. Yeah.
And it's vaguely relevant because there have been Batman games in the past. So
yes, that's
why we're allowed to talk about it.
And we've obviously got the game coming out later, this Gotham Knights later this year.
Yes.
In the fall. And then next year, which I will just drop in, Suicide Squad has been delayed till spring of next year.
Yes.
So it's been 8 years since there's been 7 years since a Rocksteady game. I am happy for them to take their time. I'm not sat here waiting on a Rocksteady game like one came out a few years ago. So they can take all the time they need, because I really, after watching the Suicide Squad, I am desperate for that game to be just stellar, an absolute riot. So that's been moved to next year. Fingers crossed it's a good one. Everything looks pretty good so far. So I'm very excited for that next year. So I think that's everything. Wrapped all that up at the end. That everything from you, Will?
That is everything from me.
Right. Well, brilliant. Right. Well, make sure to like and subscribe. Share your thoughts down in the comments below. You can catch us on Twitter at InGaming Podcast. Be sure to send us any feedback, any messages. Just like with the tweet on Elden Ring, if you've got a question, fire it over to us and we'll answer it. And we'll be back again next Tuesday, 7 p.m. BST now, because the clocks have gone forward. So now I'll have to change all the branding. 7 p.m. BST, and we hope you have a great rest of your week. And with that being said, it's goodbye from me.
Bye from me.
Goodbye. See you next week. Bye, everybody.